Welcome back into the shed for our second edition of Ballot Banter. Today, I've got a District 2 resident. We're going to be talking about North and Northeast Portland, which is District 2. And I've got Kiel Johnson here with me. Kyle, thanks so much for coming over.
Hey, Jonathan. It is great to be here in the shed.
All right. And we've got all of our things. We've got our voter pamphlets. I've actually got my ballot. I'm not going to be filling it out, but
I got my ballot, and hopefully by the end of this, I'll fill it out.
Okay.
I haven't filled it out yet. I got to rank my 6 people.
Folks might have heard the District 4 one that we did. So the idea is just let's talk a little bit about the district in general. Let's talk about the candidates, obviously focusing a little bit on what we think about how their transportation perspectives and approaches would go. Yeah. So just to give you a little heads up. First of all, how are you personally as Kiel Johnson feeling about the race?
I'm feeling like really good. I think it's pretty amazing that we live in a city that has public financing for elections, that has this ranked choice voting. It's very progressive, social democratic. Like, I think we've got a pretty amazing system, and it's going to take a little while for everybody to figure out what all happens and how it will work. But I'm feeling optimistic in the long run about how it will impact sort of policy and Portland's ability to do cool stuff.
And just so folks know, you're approaching this as a father, a resident of Cully.
Yeah.
Resident of Cully, business owner.
Yep.
Sort of go by bike, the biggest bike valley in North America, and somewhat as an advocate, although you're not here speaking in any way for any advocacy group in particular.
Right. Yeah, that's correct.
Good. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
I'm still on the board for Bike Loud, but these are my views.
Awesome. And then what about in terms of District 2 specifically? Have you gone to house parties? What kind of events and forums and stuff have you gone to so far? Besides Bike Happy Hour, because I know you're regularly there.
Yeah. I hosted a really successful Zoom sort of fundraiser where we had a candidate from each district, and we did a Zoom fundraiser and got about 50 people to give individual donations to a bunch of candidates. And that was really successful. I teamed up with a few other Portlanders to do that. And I've been to some of the public forums where it seems like all of these different nonprofit groups are sort of hosting like a public forum where they get their favorite candidates, and the candidates all get like 3 minutes to make their pitch. And I've been talking to different candidates and paying attention. It's been really interesting. I think one thing that's really stood out to me this election is just like all the candidates are trying to figure out how to get their information out and how to differentiate themselves. And I feel like BikePortland has really like shown the importance of BikePortland in terms of like being able to communicate and create a narrative around bikes. I think also the Oregonian has really like been very powerful in sort of shaping the narrative citywide of like what the conversation is. And yeah, maybe not to the I don't always agree with the Oregonian editorial board. So
yeah, we will get into that in a few minutes because I do think that the Oregonian's endorsements are important. Whether you like them or not, they're important and they do have sway. So let's get into the district, specifically District 2, North and Northeast. I forgot to look at the exact geography, but essentially everything in the North Portland Peninsula, then all the way to like the start of Parkrose, right? So it goes pretty far northeast, if I'm not mistaken, right? And then down to like the Alameda or so, or down to like Humboldt, closer in. So basically all north and northeast. That's not considered East Portland or
all of St. John's.
All of St. John's, the whole peninsula. So big geography. It's the second highest percentage of non-white in terms of its demographics. It's the highest for Black residents with 10%. And what are some stats on D2? The median income is also in second, so $90,000 or so is the median income in District 2, second only to District 4, pretty close to District 4 though. So, and it relates to, just to give people a comparison, District 2's median income is $90,000, District 1 is $60,000. So those are the differences there. And I wonder, when you think about District 2, do you think there's any specific issues that like jump right out that are maybe unique? When I talked to Lisa, obviously in Southwest, the topography is super distinct and a big part of like their politics, especially when it comes to transportation funding, just with how many hills and the stormwater issues. So that's something that jumps out. What do you think about District 2? Is there anything that jumps out that makes it different than the other districts?
I mean, we got the I-5.
Yes.
Cuts through the middle of the district.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge thing. And some of the candidates have been speaking to that.
Okay.
Although I don't think that there's any like standout candidate who has really made that like a center issue for their campaign. But that's a huge issue that, these people will have some ability to advocate for or against.
Yes. For
influence.
For sure. I'm curious on what you've heard about that. But I think now I'd like to... Let's get folks a little bit more familiar with the candidates, since that's what we're here to talk about, is who the heck to rank.
So like 22
total.
22, yeah.
I think this district of all 4 has the most that have qualified for public financing. So let's give ourselves, we're both residents here, so we can pat ourselves on the back that our district in some ways has like the most engaged field, the most viable field of candidates to some degree, that we have the most candidates that qualified. I think of the 22, I think 17 or 18 qualified for public financing. Wow. 18. Of those, I think there's 15 or so that are actually running campaigns. And of course, you can rank up to 6. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the folks in town endorsed 3. So there's definitely a pecking order that's sort of evolving. But then again, the field is this is such an interesting race, because even among the endorsements, there are different sets of people getting endorsed. So it's kind of all over the map. Mm-hmm. But let me go down in alphabetical order the folks that I've had written down as the ones that are viable, running, really running strong campaigns that I think are going to get some significant amount of ranking. So in alphabetical order, we have James Armstrong, and you can throw in like a word or two about each person if you have it. So first one is James Armstrong. He's an eye clinic owner and an accountant. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I talked to him at one of the last Thursdays.
Okay.
And I mentioned, what do you think about like charging for parking on Alberta? And he kind of shut me down after I made that comment.
Okay, that's so Kyle. Like, folks, if you don't know Kyle, he will just look you right in the face and just ask you like a thoughtful question that actually makes you have to think about it for a second. So I appreciate that.
It's an important thing.
Yeah. The next one, Michelle DePass, who I know Kyle and I both have a lot of thoughts about. She's a City of Portland climate change. She works at Bureau of Planning and Sustainability in the climate change side. I think she does like analysis and planning related stuff on climate change. She's also vice chair of the Portland Public School Board. If I'm not mistaken, she was the first Black vice chair of the Portland Public School Board.
So she's also the chair too, I think.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think she was a chair, maybe was termed out. Now she's vice chair. But yeah, she's done a lot of leadership at the school board. I first met her, and maybe you're the same, through the North Williams Avenue process, where we had this big controversial project from like 2010 to 2013 or so. I don't want to get deep into each candidate right now, but I know you've probably had some interaction with her in the neighborhood.
I've known Michelle for the longest time. Super nice, compassionate. I would definitely call her a friend.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to remember that. We start talking about her a little bit more in a sec. The next one, Marnie Glickman, who's a political strategist, political consultant, has had various positions, mostly in sort of the political organizing world. And she's on some various chairs and boards of nonprofits and stuff like that. Interesting candidate, first time running for office locally. The next one, Mariah Hudson. She does comms, so communications at Oregon Health Science University. She's on a few pretty important budget advisory committees, or I should say used to be important before PBOT dissolved their budget advisory committee. Mariah Hudson was the chair. She's also on the PPS budget advisory committee, so Portland Public Schools, and lots of other positions as well. She's very involved. Also in the neighborhood level, she, I think, was in charge of the Northeast Coalition of Neighborhoods for a while. So she's also a mom riding around on her bike. I should say, too, Marnie's out riding around on her tricycle. Michelle DePass had a bike ride recently. Haven't seen James Armstrong on a bike, but there are several candidates in District 2 that are regular bike riders. The next person is Samir Kanal. He's Inclusive Policy Manager at City of Portland in the Public Safety Service area. He also set up like the Portland Police Accountability Commission. So he's got a really intriguing resume and sort of is I don't want to say a late bloomer in the race, but he is one of the people that is getting some really key endorsements, and I think been really impressive once people get to hear from him a little bit more. He's one of the people I probably regret not sitting down with more than anyone else so far in this whole election. I sort of had to cut that off at some point, and there were several candidates I wish I'd had a chance to have here in the shed, and I didn't. And Samir is definitely one of them.
Did he ever come to a bike happy hour?
He did.
He did?
Yeah, he came, at least one. I remember him being there talking to folks. The next one's Debbie Kitchen. She's another interesting candidate. Co-owns a construction company. She has climate change as a really high priority. She's also board chair emeritus for the Portland Metro Chamber. I'm not sure what that means, but she's been heavily involved in the local business community. She was a former chair of the Central East Side Industrial Council. That's Debbie Kitchen. Mike Marshall, who will be at Bike Happy Hour tonight. Looking forward to meeting him again. He's a director, co-founder of Oregon Recovers. He has some really detailed ways of approaching our, homelessness problem, addiction, recovery, all that sort of stuff. Mike is very, very well respected, actually nationally in political circles as an organizer. So he's done a lot of cool work. The next one, Will Messbelt, who lives just a block or so away from the shed. I almost didn't put him down. He's not really running a super, strong campaign, I'll say. I don't think he's spending a lot of time on it, and he's relatively unknown. Doesn't have too much experience or endorsements, but I thought I'd shout him out since he's a neighbor. Chris Olson, interesting candidate, definitely on the progressive side, and I am going to put these in columns of left, center, right. I know some people get mad at that, but for organizational reasons, I'm going to get to that after I name everybody. Chris Olson, a community organizer, healthcare nonprofits. He's spoken at Bike Happy Hour a few times. You've probably seen his name pop up if you've followed.
He's probably been to Bike Happy Hour the most.
Maybe,
or maybe him and Nat.
Him and Nat, possibly. Yeah. And then the next one, Jennifer Park, nonprofit programs director. The nonprofit she works with is related to K-8 special education, or kids that have learning challenges. I think it's a nonprofit. I'm assuming gets contracted to go into schools and help. So she's a programs director for that. She's a really interesting candidate as well, running on a social justice lens, seeing everything from that perspective. So and public health. So she's an interesting candidate for sure. Tiffany Penson is the next one. Tiffany Penson, I met her in the park a couple weeks ago at a walk that Oregon Walks did. She works with City Portland as the people and culture manager. It's in the human resources department, and that's her job. She's also worked for Sam Adams. She was part of his educational policy team. So she's got lots of experience in the building down at City Hall. I want to say 20 years she's been working at the City of Portland, most of them on the City Hall side. Now she's over on the Portland building side. The next one, Ilana Pertle-Guinea, former policy legislative advisor for Kate Brown. She also did a stint with Governor Kitzhaber, so lots of experience on the legislative side, on the Democrats, and she worked too for the AFL-CIO for a while as their legislative director. Super, super smart person. She's got some interesting endorsements. I think the Willamette Week put her #1 in their endorsements, but I'll get to that more in a second. I told you there are a lot of really good candidates. This is crazy.
It is so crazy.
A couple more. Dan Ryan, obviously current commissioner.
Yeah.
Very intriguing candidate, I will say. He's worked on a lot of housing issues. I think his biggest claim to fame is setting up the safe rest villages around town, which the conventional wisdom is saying have been successful. I think that does measure out. If you ask him, I think in all the interviews I've seen, his biggest thing he's most proud of is stopping the defunding of Portland police. So he's definitely tacking toward the right. And whenever I say left and right, this is within Portland. So he is.
Yeah, he put. I think that was in bold in the voter pamphlet that he voted to stop the defunding of the police. But originally, he ran as somebody who was skeptical of funding the police.
Yeah.
And then kind of switched once he was in office.
Yeah, I think Dan Ryan is a good representative of the shift that, I've had some of that shift too. I think a lot of people have in Portland.
Because he ran in 2020, right?
Yeah.
And he's the only current city councilor who's running to be on city council again.
Yes, that's true.
Everybody else is running to be the mayor.
Right. So he's got some pretty big advantages in terms of name recognition and the power of incumbency and that sort of thing. The next person is Bob Simrel. I've met him and talked to him. Interesting candidate, a little bit later to the race. A lot of folks don't know him. Was a sales executive for Coca-Cola and other big corporations. He ran the executive team for Tony Robbins, the big motivational speaker person. Super interesting guy. He's done stints at Nike.
I missed the bus the other day, and he was standing on the street corner, just waving, and I talked to him for probably a half an hour, just on the street corner, the two of us.
Okay. After I'm done with the list, I want to hear what he said. And the next one, Jonathan Tassini, political organizer, written a few books, kind of like from the Bernie Sanders wing to some degree, although, Jonathan's big thing is like standing up for working class people, and he's got an amazing track record. Highly recommend reading his Wikipedia page. He's been around politics for a long time. Definitely in the labor movement, very well respected figure. The next person, Nat West, who a lot of folks on the Bike Portland world know. I've sat down with him in the shed, and he's been to Bike Happy Hour several times. Obviously, business owner. He says that, I love this, Kyle, because I think, the work that you do has something to do with this. But when Nat first thought of running, he said that he wanted to sort of represent small businesses, which as owner of a cider company for 12 years, it built it into the biggest cider company in Portland. He had a lot to stand on in that regard. But I think he changed by the time he kind of really started his campaign, and now he talks about safe streets and the public safety and how transportation is involved in that and how that's such an important issue. So I think if you listen to his forums and interviews, he'll talk almost just as much, if not more, about safe streets and transportation being a big part of public safety as he does talking about small businesses. So I think that's really cool. He's also had
I've got a lot to say about him. I think that, he's a very strong transportation candidate for sure.
Yeah. The next one, Nabil Zaghloul, who has a ton of support in the Coley area. I guess he's got like 30 years of nonprofit experience and other experience out there. I think he's worked in public health too, but he runs like a bilingual nonprofit. It's like a service hub for Hispanic folks and people that speak Spanish in the Coley neighborhood. It's almost like maybe another type of Verde. Verde focuses on environmental justice issues. I forget the name of the group that Nabil runs, but there's a lot of Nabil Zaghloul signs around the neighborhood.
Yeah, I like his yard sign because it's got a picture of him on it.
Yeah. Have you been surprised? Some people's yard signs are really bad, and I see them and I'm like, gosh, that's not going to work. You know? Yeah. I really love Jennifer Park as a candidate. She's whip smart, tons of great energy, but her campaign signs are not great. It looks like someone's cleaning your gutters. Like, they just don't, it doesn't look like a campaign sign. I can barely read her name. Anyway, okay. Let's get into some more of the punditry.
So many candidates.
So many candidates.
And they're all like really good.
A lot of them are great.
Like,
yes.
If you think back to like any other time when people were running for city council, it was like 2-3 people maybe.
Yeah.
And now we've got this huge list, and I think that's like a really cool thing to appreciate, how this new system has like encouraged all these great people to want to like participate.
Yeah, I agree. It's sort of an embarrassment of riches for District 2, and people really have to do some homework. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I want to have these conversations, is to kind of have the overview. Okay, I'm going to split them up into left, center, right. Maybe that'll help us as a jumping off point for our commentary portion.
And then, so I think there's 3 of the candidates that have gotten the highest matching, which is like 700.
Yeah, if you look at highest number of contributions overall, so folks can gauge that in terms of popularity, but those are citywide, right? So if you want to look at how many people have donated to candidates, the top 3 as of this morning are Nat West, Dan Ryan, Marnie Glickman.
In District 2, yeah.
In District 2, yeah. The next 3, which is quite a drop-off, actually. So again, we got to rank 6, so it's interesting. The next 3 after them are Mariah Hudson, Tiffany Penson, and Samir Kanal. But that's a little bit of a drop. In terms of dollars, that's a little different because, some of them have had lots of small donors, like Nat West and Marnie Glickman have tons of small donors. But then, folks like, let's say, Dan Ryan and Tiffany Penson have a lot of high individual donors with giving large amounts, so it's balancing out. But the most approved match is also matching dollars is Nat West, followed by Dan Ryan, Tiffany Penson, Marnie Glickman, Mariah Hudson, and then a big drop off to Alana Purtle-Guinea. So yeah, you can look at those on the smalldonorelections.org site. And I should also say that a lot of the research I've been able to do is from there's a lot of great sources, because a lot of the local media is really working hard. So just get on the Google machine and go for it. Yeah. But the Rose City Reform candidates page has been super, super helpful. They definitely deserve a shout out. Okay, let's split these up, and then we'll see. Though after this, we'll go into just some endorsements and stuff. On the left of all those candidates, right? On the left, I'm going to put into the left bucket Marnie Glickman, Samir Kanal, Chris Olson, Jennifer Park, Alana Purtle-Guinea, Jonathan Tassini, and Nat West. And I should say as a disclaimer, if there's one thing I want people to know about this election, is that these labels don't mean as much as you might think. But there's also so many candidates that I struggle to find ways to organize them. So that's why I'm using these labels, right? But even within these labels, and you'll see with the endorsements, it's fascinating. You have people like endorsed by the police that are like, you know, also endorsed by like the street truck. I mean, it's really interesting how it all mixes. So that being said, those are my candidates in the left sphere of this district. In the center, I would put James Armstrong, Michelle DePass, Debbie Kitchen, Mike Marshall, and Nabil Zaglul. And on the right of this group, I would put Mariah Hudson, Will Mesbel, Tiffany Penson, Dan Ryan, and Bob Simrell. So I hope that's helpful for folks. And then, I mean, do you think that's generally tracks with what?
I think that sounds pretty accurate. Yeah. And I mean, they're all like going to be voting for, you know, Democrats and stuff. They're all Democrats.
Yeah, for sure.
But
you know, there's definitely it doesn't track like it normally would. So any preconceived ideas you have about what's left, center, right when it comes to like traditional national politics, throw that out the window.
This is Portland.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to help people organize. That's all. And I don't mean anything negative by those labels at all. It's simply a way of being. It's just like a color. It's like purple, orange, or green. Like right. It's like just trying to help people understand. Which maybe that's flawed because people cannot hear those terms without thinking there's some kind of judgment. But anyway, let's talk about endorsements because I think that's also helpful for people to, you know, have a sense of them. The Oregonian endorsed Penson. They endorsed Tiffany Penson, Nat West, and Dan Ryan. Were you surprised by those?
Not really. I was surprised that they didn't even mention Marnie in their whole article. Definitely not the Dan Ryan endorsement. And I think that in their endorsements, they're kind of like trying to choose people from all those different, from the left, the center, and maybe more to the right for each district. I kind of noticed.
Yeah, they are.
Like they're trying to create sort of a balanced council. It seems like. So it's not just like they're not just picking like all the people who are maybe like more to the right, which is maybe what the Oregonian editorial board is typically.
Yeah, I agree.
And like, yeah, they endorse Candace in District 1, and they're like, oh, we don't really agree with everything that she says, but it's good to have, like, she'll represent a certain part of Portland that's important.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about that. Do you agree with that approach? So I can appreciate it as the Oregonian, as a media group. I've actually also thought of it that way, where I do think it's healthy to have people from different sort of political perspectives to some degree. And it's been interesting that the Oregonian is clearly stating that intentionally. Like, do you think that's a good way? Are you seeing it that way? Or are you just like, I'm going to do all the certain people, I don't care what their, you know, perspective is?
I mean, I don't know. I think it just depends on like, are they all going to be able to get along and like work together?
Yeah, good point.
If you have like, you know, all these different perspectives, and then it just becomes like a battle of like the three different like groups.
Yes, that's a great point. I agree. Right. It's like I say that I want different perspectives, but I'm also super afraid that if people dig their heels in and egos get the better of everything, then we're not going to make the progress. So it's kind of a tricky thing. You've got to find just the right people. Again, that's why I think it's important to do homework in the selection. But yeah, the Oregonians thing was weird. They only interviewed 5 people. So they only had 5 finalists out of all these. So they left a lot of people out. And they got some heat from other folks for the other districts for who they invited in and who they didn't invite. But hey, it's their business. They can do whatever they want. The Willamette. So I think there's 3 media endorsements are really, you know, have weight in my opinion, just because they actually are rigorous and they go through a process, and I think they matter. So besides the Oregonian, I think the Willamette weeks are important.
Yeah.
The only 2 that share between the O and the Willie week is Dan Ryan. So he also was endorsed by the Willamette week, although they gave him sort of a second ranking, and they ranked Alana Purtle-Guinea first. Interesting choice. Because she's not necessarily someone who's popping up on the top of other lists that I'm seeing. Great candidate though, so I'm not surprised in that regard. And then the third person that the Willie Week endorsed was Michelle DePass. Michelle DePass was also endorsed by the Mercury. So the Mercury endorsed Samir Kanal, Michelle DePass, and Jonathan Tassini. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think 7 different candidates endorsed by these 3 media groups. So super interesting. And there's also what some of them did is they also told you who else you could rank. So I would recommend people look that up. The Street Trust almost endorsed so many people. It's I guess not. Well, I guess they endorsed like 8. At that point, it's not as meaningful. But let's say the Street Trust endorsed Marnie Glickman, Samir Kanal, Alana Pertle-Guinea, Jennifer Park, Jonathan Tassini, Mike Marshall, and Nabil Zaghloul. And they didn't endorse Mariah Hudson, which I thought was interesting, despite her credentials of being chair of the PBOT Bureau Bike Advisory Committee, or the Bureau Budget Advisory Committee. I thought that was interesting. Any other anything about those media endorsements that stand out to you, or is it kind of just like, okay, it's all over the map like everything else?
I mean, I think that those endorsements are super important, and yeah, that's what people are going to be looking to, and just having those media institutions like providing that sort of knowledge to people, I think will be really impactful. So I think those endorsements are really important for whoever's going to win.
And a couple other endorsements that folks may be curious about: Portland Neighbors Welcome, which is a really strong housing nonprofit that talks about basically housing for all and that sort of thing. They endorsed Jonathan Tassini, Nat West, Marnie Glickman, Alana Pertle-Guinea, Debbie Kitchen, Samir Kanal, Michelle DePass. Renee Gonzalez endorsed 4 people in District 2. He endorsed Mariah Hudson, Bob Simrell, Tiffany Penson, and Dan Ryan, who are all 4 on my right sphere, I must say.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Makes sense.
Yep. And Rubio endorsed basically everybody, so it doesn't even matter to list it out. The Portland Police Association endorsed Dan Ryan, Tiffany Penson, and Bob Simrell. So, you know, when I'm saying left, right, center, I'm not just making those up for my own reasons. Like, there are certain ways that we can look at these elections and certain ways of thinking about politics, I think, that are matching up and sort of putting folks in on a spectrum, let's say, in this district that might be helpful. You ride your bike around a lot. Have you noticed anybody winning the yard sign race?
Well, Nabil in Cully is definitely winning the yard sign, and then Mariah Hudson, I've seen a lot of her signs too. I love all the yard signs. I love seeing yard signs. I think it's one of my favorite things about local democracy, and people being able to like express their like views a little bit with a yard sign. Yeah,
me too. It's fun. I was thinking of doing a video, just put a GoPro on my bike and just go down all the bike boulevards and like try to count them as we go and like see who's winning in each district. But I would take a little bit of time. Do you think it's important to have geographic representation on District 2? Would you think of it like, let's get someone from Coley, let's get someone from the I-5 corridor, and then make sure we have a good St. John's rep?
I think that it's already a geographic area in District 2, so I'm less worried about that, and I think I'm more focused and like thinking about it in terms of like making sure that we have like a strong transportation advocate. And like these people, I think they're gonna have a lot less power, a lot less ability to like influence policy and city government by themselves. So they're going to have to be able to work with other council members to sort of form coalitions to like get things done. And I'm thinking of them more as like the advocates for our district. And so it was really interesting this week, as you reported, there were 2 people that were killed riding their bikes. And I was really struck by Timur and Steph writing that joint email together. And it was sort of like the start of, that was the first like joint email that I've seen from council candidates. And then our district, Nat, also sent out an email talking about it.
Yeah.
The city council coming up is going to be like the advocates for these different issues.
Yeah, I think you're getting into like where people are thinking there might be these caucuses forming, and we're already starting to see some of that on the campaign trail. Let's just go down and talk about, from a transportation perspective in particular, who would be strong. In talking about caucuses forming, I've got to give a shout out to Nat West on his approach in terms of being collaborative. I think is like standout. If you think about the way he ran his business, I like people that have actually done things you can look back on and not just listen to what they say. He was so collaborative as a cider maker, right? Doing pop-ups at other breweries. And I mean, the brewing folks are like known for their collaboration. It's one of the reasons why Portland and Oregon's had such a strong brewing culture all these years. But even on the trail, Nat will go to other people's events, and he's super humble. He never like looks to put himself out in the front, and he's just there to support. He was at one of Willie's things digging up pylons underneath the Cathedral Park the other day. So he's already forming like collaborative, relationships on the campaign, which I think is really neat in terms of like how he might lead. So I really appreciate that. And I do think Nat is probably the strongest transportation candidate in the entire race citywide, outside of, Tamor Ender and Steph Routh, maybe. He's just been super good about talking about transportation stuff.
Yeah, and that he worked and currently works as a bus driver and has that perspective and wanted to get that perspective.
Yeah.
To me, that speaks really highly of just like wanting to engage around transportation and just sort of seeing the importance of transportation to our city. And I think that's like something that I've felt is like been missing on city council, are like these leaders who understand the importance of transportation for what they're doing. And we just haven't had it. Maybe Sam Adams back in the day for like 2 weeks was like that leader. And I think that it's a really important role that city council has, is sort of providing leadership around transportation, because you can't change everything with the Portland City Council, but you can influence a lot of transportation things and how our streets run and operate.
Yeah, I agree. Nat would be the first ever TriMet bus operator to be on city council. That'd be kind of cool. He also has actually a policy thing he wants to. He's someone I think it might look to try to change the governance of TriMet, which has been a thorn in the side of activists for a long time, because TriMet's a little bit unaccountable. They have a state appointed board. A lot of folks think that TriMet's not as responsive as they should be locally. And actually, Nat's got, I think in his questionnaire to the Portland Metro Chamber, he talked about how he wants to change the relationship between the city and TriMet. So he's already getting at some of that stuff to putting that into motion. I actually saw him too in a forum talk about daylighting intersections. So like I shared a video of Chad Likens from District 4 talking about modal filters. So any candidate that gets nerdy on transportation policy is going to definitely get my attention.
Just somebody who knows that term, daylighting an intersection.
Exactly.
Like, we haven't had a person running for city council who would know what daylighting an intersection is.
For sure.
Or know anything about like TriMet and how it operates. And
for sure. In terms of transportation, what about Michelle DePass? The story I have on her is I was in that meeting for the Williams Avenue project, and she was the person that stood up and basically detonated this bomb about racism and how the black residents of that neighborhood felt like they weren't being heard, and that all the injustice of the past was still not rectified, and this bike lane was symbolic of that, and all this stuff. And she really just changed the whole trajectory of that project. So I respect the fact that she stood up and was speaking those words in that room, which could not have been super easy for her. And I know that she's someone who, she has her e-bike, she bikes around town. What do you think about her transportation, credentials in general, serving the district?
I think that she's definitely a skeptic of biking, but also gets it, and gets especially the sustainability, climate importance of it, and environmental importance of it. I think it's really important to have buy-in from the black community about how city council operates, and to feel like the black community is represented. And I think Michelle has really made an effort in her campaign to represent that community. And so I think that she's somebody who can be sort of like won over, and especially like get the black community on board with certain transportation projects. But she's definitely, I think, a skeptic, and somebody who's willing to like stand up and say like, I don't think that this is representing especially the black community in Portland. And she's somebody who's got, a lot of history in Portland. Her family has lived here for a while, and she has sort of seen the change in Northeast Portland, and is really like a part of that.
Yes.
I thought that it was interesting in her responses to the bike loud questionnaire, she talked about how biking is sort of this privilege that not everybody has access to, that her goal is really to make it less elitist, yeah, she said that the gap between those who cycle and those who don't could be explained in terms of race and income, and we have the data to prove it. I don't quite, that's not quite my understanding of like why there's this gap, but yeah, that's sort of the perspective that she's coming from and towards a lot of the transportation questions.
Yeah, I think it would be intriguing if she was to win. Just some of the conversations that we could have about transportation and cycling specifically would be really interesting.
Yeah, but she's willing to like engage. Yeah. She's willing to come to the shed and talk to you. And, you know, she came and we went on a walk when the 7th Avenue Greenway was going on and got some fried chicken and chatted. And so
she held a bike ride, like a campaign event that was a bike ride.
Yeah.
Did you hear anything about that?
I saw that she was doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was curious if you...
And she posted a picture. Somebody was like, doing yard signs with their cargo bike, and she posted a picture about that.
Good stuff. Okay. Anybody else stand out from a transportation perspective? I mean, good or bad, I guess. I would say...
You know, I think that Marnie Glickman would be a really strong transportation candidate. I didn't realize this, but her daughter was one of the organizers of the Youth vs. ODOT.
Oh, that's right.
And one of the things that I've been really paying attention to is when people are talking about transportation and running for District 2 is like, can they talk about anything specific, like daylighting, like a specific project that's happening? Like, are they attuned and paying attention enough to like know what's going on that they can like zero in on something? And Marnie's been super supportive of like protected bike lanes on Sandy and has talked a lot about that. So has Mariah Hudson.
Okay, good.
But yeah, I think that Marnie would be a really strong bicycling advocate.
Yeah. I think Mariah Hudson could be as well. At least she's someone who is putting bicycling out there. She's often seen on her cargo bike. She takes her kids around. She talks on the campaign trail about, to her, public safety would mean that her son could jump on a TriMet bus with his tuba and get to school. And she's been to Bike Happy Hour several times. So I think she's someone who has the experience of riding around Portland streets, which I do think is an important element.
Yes, I think that she's like, in her campaign ads, has like highlighted bicycling the most, and used her electric cargo bike. She's got a rad wagon.
Yep.
And it's in like a lot of her pictures, and is like an important part of the like campaign image that she's sort of like projecting, and I think that's important. In her questionnaire, she talked about the Green Loop, which is a transportation project, and that would be in District 2, and so that kind of like stood out to me that she even knew what the Green Loop was.
Have you heard much about from Samir Kanal on transportation stuff? Every time I hear him talk, I'm just super impressed. He's so sharp and just well thought out, and it's like he's ran for office before, but he talks in a way that isn't super too polished, which is a red flag for me, I should say. He told something in the Metro Chambers questionnaire. He had an interesting idea of saying he wants to move the responsibility of building new sidewalks away from private property owners and back to PBOT. Thinks that we would get more sidewalks built if PBOT was in charge of more of them. I don't know how they do it. Well, they would be able to build them more cheaply per unit than a private developer probably, but do they want to do anything that's going to cost extra money? Probably not. But it may solve some of the issues we have with gaps in sidewalks waiting for development. So I thought that was interesting.
In Cully, we have a lot of streets without sidewalks, but we just have these orphan sidewalks where when like one property is developed, they'll have a sidewalk right there, and it's pretty useless.
Yeah.
And so we're just waiting for the entire block to be like developed before we have a sidewalk network that people can use.
Yeah.
Doesn't quite make sense.
Yeah. When it comes to Dan Ryan's been an interesting person on transportation. He definitely has like I think a car driver first view of things. He does talk about how he likes to walk to parks, and public safety is just being able to walk around while feeling safe and all that sort of stuff. But I can't stop thinking about the way he talked to PBOT and PBOT staff during a lot of the Division Street project stuff that was going on at City Council. I just found it to be, it's funny. I like how Dan Ryan is not afraid to like be critical and call things out. I think that's missing a lot from Portland politics. Of course, there's always a balance there, and like how far are you willing to let someone go, and how much does that criticism prevent you from working with them? And I think that's, for me, a little bit of my caution around Dan Ryan, is that he calls people names and he's using quotes like the houseless industry and all this stuff. So that part I don't love. But when it comes to transportation, I also had, some concern about, he's talking about Division Street and how he couldn't make a U-turn and how it was stressful because the medians were there, and, questioning whether or not the PBOT really did their homework on that project. And I was like, oh gosh. So that's interesting, because as advocates, I think we have to balance realities. I think Dan Ryan is going to be one of the picks. I mean, I have a hard time thinking he's not going to get one of the 3 spots. Yeah. So it's a matter of like thinking about, people should not rank anyone they don't, if you don't like someone, don't rank them for sure. But it's just from a point of like trying to understand what it's going to mean going forward. I wonder if you've heard anything about Dan Ryan when it comes to transportation, or like what your vibe is on that.
Yeah, I remember at one city council meeting, they were talking about bikes, and he asked this question of like, it would be really interesting to know why biking is like declining right now. And he like asked PBOT to like come or report back and let him know, because he didn't really have an idea of why that was going on, but he was curious about it. But didn't really have any theories himself of why that was. In his questionnaire to the Oregonian did a joint questionnaire with OPB, I think, and they had one transportation question. It was the most frustrating question. The question was, which would you prioritize, the creation of protected bike lanes and priority bus lanes, or improved surface of existing degraded driving lanes? Yeah. That was their only transportation question. And Dan Ryan's answer was, he talked about the importance of neighborhood greenways, and that he wanted to have really robust neighborhood greenways, but sort of everybody else like talked about the importance of protected bike lanes, but his answer just focused on the neighborhood greenways, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. My hunch about Ryan is that he is someone who doesn't think bikes should be on major streets. I'll just put it that way. That to me kind of sums up, and that's kind of how he would talk about it. And I think anybody that has that opinion, 5 minutes with me, I think I could change their mind about that and just have them see it a little bit differently. But I think that's kind of where he's coming from. So do with that what you may. But I also looked at that question. I think it was, the Oregonian, right? When they said, and it was interesting to see some people just rejected it as a false dichotomy, which I think is a pretty smart way to say it. But I also appreciate that some people were like, oh, obviously it's bus lanes and bikes. Yeah. That's what you should prioritize.
Yeah, which was surprising.
Yeah. I mean, you have some great, in District 2 here, James Armstrong, my priority, he answered it by saying, my priority for transportation is safety. Yeah. Protected bike lanes reduce collisions and injuries by 30 to 50%. Here's this iClinic owner accountant who is maybe not on everybody's list, but he's throwing out statistics on how protected bike lanes are safer. So that's impressive.
I was impressed by that too.
Yeah,
I highlighted that.
So, that was really good. And he was smart enough to say, if we do that and make transit better, it'll reduce wear and tear on the roads. So kudos to James Armstrong for that answer.
Yeah, I liked Mike Marshall's answer too. Given the threat of climate change, we always need to prioritize alternative forms of transportation over automobiles. It's painful but necessary.
That's speaking my language. I'm gonna hopefully he pulls out that line tonight at Bike Happy Hour.
Jennifer Park said, "In this binary, I would prioritize protected bike lanes and priority bus lanes." It's pretty cool.
Yes, I liked Chris Olson's answer. This is a false dichotomy. We can do both by appropriately taxing corporations. Oh, yeah. So he was at Bike Happy Hour last week saying he wants to double the Portland Clean Energy Fund tax to 2%. Yeah. He's got to be the only candidate willing to say he wants to raise taxes, especially at that tax.
Yeah.
So
the Portland Clean Energy Fund is interesting in how that's being discussed, especially around transportation. It's sort of seen as a lot of people are pointing to we can just fund it with PSEF, and we'll just fund everything with the Portland Clean Energy Fund.
Have you heard anyone from District 2 who's like, yeah, let's send that back to voters, and kind of the Renee Gonzalez line? I haven't heard that, but I could have missed it.
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
No.
That's good. I don't think that would be a great position for folks to take. So any other transportation related folks? I think we pretty much went over the ones that are really kind of like jumping off the chart for me.
The one thing that I still think is missing from the conversation is like what bicycling can mean for Portland, and a real vision for like what it would look like, and explain why we should be moving to 25% of all trips by bike, and like what the benefits of that would look like, and sort of really like creating a narrative around that vision. And I think that's like part of our role as advocates to also like sort of create that vision. But I think that's something that I think is still kind of missing from the conversation, that I haven't really felt from any candidate.
Yeah. Well, they're not being asked that on the campaign trail.
Right. Yeah.
You know, that's the thing. And out of respect for issues that are like life and death major crises, I could see why other media outlets and forums aren't necessarily spending time diving into this issue of like, what's your vision for how bicycling can change Portland?
And when the Oregonian, that's their only question is like, which do you prefer, fixing potholes or bike lanes? You know, like, yeah, it's hard to.
But I mean, I do appreciate that some of the candidates have taken the public safety question. I think mostly, like, if you think of like Samir Kanal, Nat West, Jonathan Tassini, they won't answer it with the same old. They won't just go into talking about policing and people living on the street. They'll actually talk about roads. Even Jonathan Tassini mentioned he had that question, and he turned it around and said, hey, I'm really concerned about the people who live outside that are walking across the street and living next to freeways, and how they're such a big part of our fatal crash statistics, and how that was a concern of his. So, you know, people are bringing it up around the public safety thing. But yeah, you're right. There's nobody out there talking about what the vision could be. I got to say, I actually think that's pretty smart. I mean, if I was running, I would probably be trying to do that, but it's not something that I would expect anyone to do right now. I do think next election cycle, we could start to expect that. Just right now, the politics for cycling are just not there, where you would actually have someone using their political capital on the campaign trail to speak about that. Now, when they come to Bike Happy Hour, they will. If they asked questions by Bike Loud, they will. But I'm curious. I want to know what these folks are saying outside of our circles, right? That's what I think is really important to hear and to understand. And yeah, none of them are making this vision for cycling, you know, a big part of their campaign. But I think that was really just like the past. I don't know if we'll ever get to that point again. I think because we've evolved as biking city and as bike advocates to some degree. And I appreciate when candidates are saying, if let's say a question about revitalizing downtown or just even public safety, then they'll talk about how the importance of public space and activating parks and activating, you know, that kind of thing. That's kind of getting into our space. Anybody that talks about really good urban spaces and public spaces that are active and vibrant, I'm like, okay, that's not that far away from being like, yeah, bikes, because cars can't be a part of that, you know, so.
Yeah,
I may be stretching for optimism here, but
like some sort of narrative to be like, all right, this is why we're taking away some car parking spots and why we're taking away the space. And like for like 82nd, I feel like we've kind of missed that a little bit.
Well, will there be a big project in this district where we might look to these candidates pretty soon? Sandy's going to be the one.
That's going to be the big project.
Yeah.
We're going to repave it in 2 years from 12th to 28th, put it back together however we want. And yeah. And I think that ultimately, like, my take is that it needs to involve beyond PBOT. Like, it has to prosper Portland. There's other money that has to come in to make these spaces really vibrant and livable and attractive. And PBOT just like will always, you know, be hurting for money and not have the money to like really make the kind of spaces that we need to like get people walking and biking around.
Yeah. That's going to be really interesting to watch how that all plays out. Yeah. But I'm excited that our district's going to have a huge project. So we'll see what kind of alliances can form and who can really step up. Who knows? Maybe it's Nat West leading the charge with, someone else, which brings me to kind of like wrapping up and talking about who we think might take these 3 seats. I gave my picks for District 4, and I wanted to do it with District 3. I literally couldn't come up with a third person at this point, which is insane because I've been just steeping myself in all this stuff, so I can just imagine what some other folks are struggling with. I have a strong feeling that Nat West and Dan Ryan will be elected.
Yeah.
Do you agree with those two, or do you have any others that you think are shoe-ins or what?
I'm a little skeptical about Dan Ryan.
Are you?
Yeah, I think that there's enough people that are sort of like opposed to this current city council and want something new, and I think it's just a matter of if they hear something attractive from other candidates. Yeah, so I'm a Dan Ryan skeptic that he'll make it. And he just hasn't been campaigning that much. I haven't seen him like show up, but he's got he's got all of his yard signs from previous times, and it's got the nice St. John's Bridge on it, and he got some endorsements.
He does have strong endorsements. He goes way back in North Portland, from his just life and family, and so he's well-known quantity in that regard. It is hard to say. The power of incumbency is a thing. He does have some stuff to say that he did while he was up there. I do think those things align with where a significant amount of Portland voters are to some degree. I think he's getting a little bit seduced by the Renee Gonzalez wing, and sort of like, I'm getting into more of my personal take. I think he's getting too far over into the like tough on crime stuff. And I don't like how he has he's one of these people that I feel is like going to hold grudges. I don't know if he's going to work well with others necessarily, because I do hear him throwing around basically what do you derogatory names for certain groups of people and painting with broad brushes, which to me is a big red flag. He's kind of being like, the housing first people and they'll never budge and all this stuff, which I just don't think that's a very productive way of looking at. I'm all for someone that's going to criticize the status quo or criticize entrenched power and stuff, but don't start using labels like that and holding grudges. So I'm getting too much into my Dan Ryan thoughts here, but I think he's going to get one of the spots. That's my prediction.
Okay.
And I think Nat West is strong enough. If you look everything across the board with Nat, donations, name recognition, just the way he speaks he's so good at this for being a first time person. He doesn't talk like a politician, but he also has confidence in, he thinks about things in a different way, which I really appreciate. He's not someone who takes a question and then gives you the answer that you're going to expect. He'll kind of twist it around, but then give you something where that's actually pretty interesting. Like some question he had about something unrelated to how the city's going to work. He turned into hey, the first order of business for council is going to be, let's figure out how council is going to work so we can actually do things quickly. So stuff like that, I think speaks highly of Nat West. But the third person, I don't know.
Who knows? Yeah.
I mean, Samir Kanal is amazingly bright and great at campaigning. He's going to be an unbelievable politician. And a lot of these people, they don't make it this time. They're going to make it next time. Pertl could sort of sweep in as a dark horse. Nabil could as well.
Alana, she's got a lot of good endorsements.
Yeah. I mean, to pass, you could make an argument that she gets the third seat.
Yeah.
I mean, she's such a known quantity. A lot of people will be comfortable with her. So
I did get a letter from her that she missed a signature and isn't in the voters pamphlet, which I think
that's a thing.
Yeah.
Tiffany Penson has a really strong sign game all around the sort of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard corridor, and a little bit to the west, on the going neighborhood Greenway area. I see a bunch of her signs. So.
And Mariah Hudson too.
Yeah. I think every vote is going to count. So I hope everybody takes the time to do their research.
Yeah.
Rank 6 people, get them all in there. And I don't know, what else haven't we talked about, Kyle, that we should talk about?
I think it's just a really exciting thing that every time we get to vote, I get very excited about voting, about like, there's so many places in the world and times of the world where people haven't had this opportunity. I've got a lot of friends from all over the world, and everybody's got different abilities to influence the world around them, and this is like our time to do that. And most of the year, the Oregonian gets to sort of dictate the conversation with their like polling questions and what kind of a narrative and questions they ask around the city. And this is like our time to do a real poll of everybody in Portland. And so I think it's really important. I'm very optimistic and excited about how transportation is starting to emerge and be talked about in this election, and I think that it will continue to sort of evolve. Especially, none of these people have really done anything, None of them have done anything that to annoy anybody or anything egregious that people don't like, and so they're all kind of these unknown quantities. And so it's such an interesting opportunity to get to vote on this whole new system of government and this whole new city council. It's a really cool thing to get to be a part of. So appreciate coming to the shed to get to talk about it.
Yeah, I appreciate having you here. It was so cool. Should we get our pens out and vote?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay,
yeah,
cut the
I'll
camera.
Pick my 6.
Thanks for coming over, Kyle. It's so good to have you here.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan.